While the humans of the 24th century may seem very different to us here today, ultimately, all humans, even going all the way back into the past, have the same life patterns as we do. We have to eat, we have to sleep, and we have to bathe. Hello everyone, this is Venom Geek Media here, and today, yes, I'm going to be talking about one of perhaps the more banal elements of Star Trek, that is bathing, personal hygiene. You see, while in Star Trek Original Series we get a taste of the future of humanity, ultimately, a lot of what their personal lives actually looked like is very rarely covered. You tend to see a lot of it in the early pilots of TOS, but for the most part it's actually relatively limited. We'll get an awful lot more of the personal life of people in the future in Star Trek Next Generation, but that was something that ultimately was actually an idea as early as the plans for Star Trek Phase 2. That was one of the intentions of Gene Roddenberry, to actually, go into how people live in the future. And a lot of those ideas actually make it into Star Trek The Motion Picture, which actually introduces the main topic that we will be discussing today. That is the sonic shower. However, while it is something that was introduced in TMP, it's not something that we actually see all that frequently and isn't really ever properly explained what it is and why it exists. And then there's another question that we need to consider. You see, while we don't see any sonic showers in Star Trek The Next Generation, we do see in Next Generation and the Next Generation movies baths. So then we have to ask the question, when do baths come into the picture? So, without any further ado, let's get right into it. So, let's talk about showering and water preservation. You see, most of us use, showers for daily cleaning purposes. We might treat ourselves to a bath every so often, but for the most part, people in the modern world shower. Now, showering is an interesting thing because it can either use a lot of water or very little water. This is really going to be something which will be dictated by whether or not you are someone who has served in the armed forces. Actually, here's an interesting thing. Put in the comments how long your morning shower is, and put your hand up if you have or have not served in the armed forces, because I suspect that those who have served in the armed forces have become extremely adept at showering very swiftly, and the idea of how long a shower takes is going to be very different. Now, of course, showering is more efficient than using a bath, but it does still use water, and obviously the longer you shower for, the more water you're going to use. But it's not the end of the world, because water can be recycled. You can recycle the water from showers and taps. You can, of course, recycle urine, and also when you're on a climate-controlled starship, you can also recycle perspiration, because as humans sweat, of course, sweat droplets appear on the skin, and then they will evaporate and they will gradually fill the air with water vapor, just tiny bits. But that's where you have things like dehumidifiers, and a dehumidifier will take the water out of the air and turn it back into water. Thus, it can be, relatively speaking, recycled. Though, of course, ultimately, a percentage of water will be fully taken and claimed by the human body, and you won't get it back. And, of course, also, every time you're sort of reconverting water, there'll also be losses. So you're not going to have the same water supply for all the duration of your voyage. It is going to deplete, but through recycling methods, it will deplete relatively slowly. So, on the face of it, then, it doesn't seem like actually preserving water is that much of an issue, especially when we take into account that in the wider universe, actually water is a relatively abundant substance. You can get it basically anywhere. Errant comets, ice balls just out there floating among the outer planets, planetary rings like at Saturn, ice caps like on Mars. So, really, water is not going to be difficult to find in the wider universe. The only issue is going to be collection and the purification. that could be an issue. See the excellent Doctor Who episode, The Waters of Mars. So what's the problem with water? Why would we need to invent sonic showers if water is not really an issue in space travel? Well, because the fundamental issue of water isn't its scarcity, and it's not that it can quickly deplete. Indeed, that's why probably these are the two reasons why water is so crucial to all life on Earth, is because it is something that does not deplete easily, because we have the whole water cycle, and it's very abundant. The number one issue with water is storage, because water has some unique qualities. Water is incompressible, and this is, I think, unique among various forms of matter. If you were, for example, to, I believe, you can find science videos of this, but if you were to say, drop a solid ball of lead, into a molten lead, the ball of lead will fall to the bottom, because it is denser. This makes sense. Gas is the least dense version of a substance, then you get liquid, which is a little bit denser, then you get to the solid, which is a little bit denser. That is not the case with water. I'm not a chemist / biologist, so I don't know, but I'm guessing this is part of the reason that water is so essential to life on Earth, is its consistent chemical structure. So, for example, you go, oh, well, you could store water in the form of ice. That won't actually free you up any space. Put an ice cube in water, what does it do? It floats. If anyone has ever tried freezing beers, it's say a very hot day out and you want to get some beers quickly chilled, you will put some beers in the freezer, and the day maybe gets a bit away from you because you're having beers and it's hot and sunny, and you forget that the beers are in the freezer and they will explode. Well, why do they do that? Well, because the beer has frozen, the water in the beer has frozen. It's not actually changed size. It's not gotten any smaller, but the beer bottle, I presume this is what happens, the beer bottle, because that's been cooled, it's shrunk. The gaps between the molecules get smaller, and thus beer bottle meets incompressible water, and that's how you end up with your beer bottles exploding in the freezer. So this is the main problem of water, is that it is incompressible. So there's no simple storage solution for it. The more people you have on your starship that are going to be drawing on the water supply, the bigger and bigger your water supply is going to have to be. Now, you could get away with a smaller water supply spread among more people, but then that's going to put even more demands on your recycling systems. So let's look at an actual practical example. Let's look at the NX class. Now, the NX class is a very big ship, only crewed by 80 people, which I do find odd. I suppose you could argue that given the duration of the voyage, they give over an awful lot of space to, supplies and consumables. And that would probably include water. So the water supply on the original NX Enterprise is not going to be an issue compared to later on. But when we get to the Constitution class, which has 400 people on a ship that is a little bit bigger and a little bit more voluminous, but not to that level. So you're looking at a crew which is 5 times as big as that of the NX class, but the ship, I don't believe, volumetrically is 5 times as voluminous. So then you have to make your pre-existing water supply go farther. How do you do that? With a sonic shower. So what is a sonic shower? Some have theorized that a sonic shower doesn't use any water at all, and that it is vibrations used to shake loose dirt from the human body. Now, I hate to disappoint the 2% of my female audience. I don't think that is the case, because such levels of vibrations would be bone-shattering, though I don't think that would deter Captain Janeway. Yeah, suffice it to say, I don't think that sonic showers can operate via vibration or pressure, because these are all things that could do more damage to the human body than they could the dirt that they're trying to dislodge. So I don't think that's a sensible way of looking at the sonic shower. What I actually think the sonic shower is an advancement of what we previously see. In Enterprise, they have normal showers. Therefore, sonic showers are clearly a more advanced technology that has come in later, probably around about the 23rd century. So my theory is that sonic showers are an oscillating water column that goes up and down. It's the same amount of water as you would get in like a shower column. So that's, you've turned the shower on and the water is now hitting the ground. Right, pause that. Whatever that volume of water is, that is the amount of water that is going in a sonic shower, and just that amount of water. And then all that is happening is that same water is just being oscillated up and down through like gravity plating or tractor fields, something that basically moves the water up and down, obviously while not moving you up and down, since that would not be a very pleasant shower if you're constantly smashing your head into the ceiling or being smashed into the floor. So obviously there's got to be some moderation there. Might make for an interesting assassination attempt. But you're using the same volume of water as you would in a normal shower, but you're using that same water over and over again, thus drawing less of a demand on the ship's overall water supply. This means that you're not cycling as much water. It also actually has some cleaning benefits as well, because it would actually provide the water with more of an exfoliating effect. It's a bit like if you get one of them fancy showers these days where it like has sprayers in the wall. The water will come out of that with quite some force and velocity. It's not the most comfortable thing, but it is probably very good for, again, cleaning and exfoliating your skin and, general hygiene purposes. Now, theoretically, you could actually infuse the water with a detergent, although that's probably more awkward than it sounds, because human skin is very variable. People have very different skin types. Some people absolutely love using menthol-infused shower gel, minty shower gel. For some of us, that is the most agonizing thing conceivable. So, suffice it to say, there's a big range of what people would want in their cleaning products, and so I think it's probably best to just leave it up to individuals, especially considering also that Starfleet isn't just humans, but it's also various other races, and they'll probably have their own cleaning practices. So, we have discussed sonic showers and their role in the 23rd century, but come the 24th century, we need to start talking about baths. Because, of course, Counselor Troi has a bath. We discover this in the episode Genesis. We see that Counselor Troi in her quarters has actually a relatively modest, pretty standard bath, nothing to write home about, but it is a bathtub, and hitherto we have not seen them. And then, of course, come Star Trek Insurrection, she has a huge bath, something that you'd find in the likes of a 5-star hotel. It's unbelievably luxurious. It's ludicrously luxurious on the Enterprise E, and perhaps that is the real reason why there are no civilians on board the Enterprise E, is simply so that all the crew can have far more luxurious accommodations than on the Galaxy class. So, obviously, at some point, we get baths on starships. But when? I think that baths on starships are ultimately a result of matter synthesis technology, replicators. Because you no longer then need to have giant water tanks. With a replicator, you can replicate water without having to store water, which, as I've mentioned previously, has numerous issues associated with its storage because of its incompressible nature. Now, you're still going to have water tanks on starships, but that, simply put, matter synthesis makes a lot of the issues around the storage and processing of water on starships greatly simplified. My theory is that baths would first appear on the Ambassador class, and once again, I'm going to compare the Ambassador class to HMS Warrior. Why? Because they're both quantum leaps in ship design. And HMS Warrior is a very good example of having far more space than you know what to do with. If you ever have the chance to go visit HMS Warrior, you will see that there is basically an entire compartment, an entire deck, it almost feels like, that is just given over to bathtubs. Now, in fairness, HMS Warrior had a considerable crew, so it's certainly not an individual bath for everyone, but it's an awful lot of bathtubs, and this does make some sense. This is the Victorian period by this point, and cleanliness is next to godliness, and already by the late age of sail, the importance of hygiene was very much understood in the Royal Navy. It was just a case of they didn't yet have the means of practically exercising that, whereas with the introduction of baths on board warships, now they did, and they were keen to make sure everyone could bathe. And I think that that's probably the case on the Ambassador class. And it does also make sense for very long-range starships like the Ambassador class, since, baths have a certain morale effect. When people want to treat themselves, they don't go for a shower, they have a bath. And, you might say, oh, well, surely there are other ways of doing that. And it's like, yes, but in the TOS and TMP era, the reality is even the longest range starship, like Constitution or Excelsior, is going to be visiting star bases relatively frequently. The true sort of super long-range explorers don't yet exist. That comes in with the Ambassador class. That's the first ship where you will genuinely be going out, potentially for years on end. That's why having baths on such ships is very important. Now, equally, by the time we get to the Galaxy class, you could also argue that, well, that's all nice and good, but we now have the holodeck, so why does anyone need baths? But of course, the holodeck's relatively scarce on the Enterprise, and there would be an awful lot of demand on it. In any case, that's my tirade on showers and baths over. So as I say, the reality is that humans today keep clean in a way that is actually very similar to the way we did 100 to 200 years ago. The application of water, detergent, and friction. That's really all there is to it. You do not really bathe any way that is that different from a person 100 or 200 years ago. The mechanics are very much the same. It's just how you go about those mechanics. And I doubt that that will change anytime soon, because ultimately it's not people that really change. It's technology that improves. So, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Do you like my theory about sonic showers? Do you think that makes sense? Do you think that works? What are other potential cleaning methods that could be used in a starship where not necessarily water is scarce, but where water is finite? Are there other alternative methods of cleaning that you can think of? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you all in the next video. Thank you to my members for supporting the channel. My glorious Navarks, Tully DT, Zaylan Maru, and Midwest Safety. My ever-dutiful commanders, Birdmonster, Jeff Hallam, Mark Philippe, Sean Farrell, David Reeves, Rella, Gabe Logan, Nicholas Walsh, Martin McConville, JC Tech Wizard, Alcara Dreamer, Gloom Cookie, Tin Alt, and John Radek. And I salute my Centurions, Pendlebury, Marcus Hall, Julian Arnott, Freedom Trooper, Okokatum Questo, John Nicole, Athena, Tobias Klein, Bird of Play D3, Khan the Skektal Overlord, David Jackson, Quentin King, Shipmaster, Valletta Petra Siren, Jaffany Hughes, Ian Hands, Rogel Dom, Terran Emperor, Stephen Ross, Tom Mosley, and Captain Key. And I thank all my loyal sub-lieutenants. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel, and I shall see you all in the next video.